Recently, I picked up my Nintendo Switch for the first time in a while. I had been so busy with schoolwork and music projects, as well as just adjusting to my new life in quarantine, that I hadn't played a lot of video games. However, with my freshman year of college now finished and everything else wrapping up, I found myself with little else to do. All my cartridges got lost in our recent move, however, and I didn't really have anything to play. So I went into the NES program for Nintendo Switch Online. There, Zelda caught my eye. Now, I had played a couple of Zelda games and even got a good bit of the way through Breath of the Wild, but it dawned on me that as much as I enjoyed the series, I had never played all the way through a Legend of Zelda game. So, I set a little challenge for myself. Beat all of them. Every single one. In release order. I have difficulty committing to projects like this, but I felt a strange sense of determination here. So, I booted up the game and gave it a shot. After beating the game over the span of about a day and a half with walkthroughs and suspend points, I know, judge me if you must, I had a lot of thoughts on my overall experience and felt an urge to make a video about it. So here we are. Bear in mind, I'm going to try to be as fair as possible, so I will be reviewing this in context of its release date of 1986, but I'm also going to be honest about any jank it may have. So, without further ado, I'm your average teenage old man, and this is my review of the NES classic, The Legend of Zelda. This is one of the older NES games, and it was released before Nintendo really got a grasp on appealing 8-bit art. It doesn't look terrible, but it doesn't really have a style that's aesthetically pleasing. The overworld looks pretty good, with each section having its own unique feel based on the nature and architecture surrounding it. The graveyard feels creepy, the fields and forests feel open and exciting, and the mountains feel, mountainy. This uniqueness and sense of identity, unfortunately, is exclusive to the overworld though. The dungeons feel super samey, and the only real difference in their environments is the color of the stones. Other than that, it just feels like the same dungeon with varying room layouts. As far as the sprites go, they're okay. Your character sprite, Link, looks how you'd imagine an elf boy to look in 8-bit, and it's cool that they switched up the color scheme of his outfit as you get more effective equipment. You wear the classic green to start with, but as the game goes on, you can find rings to switch to blue and red flavors. As for the NPCs and enemies, they're pretty alright. Each enemy looks unique and interesting, and at first glance it's pretty clear what purpose they serve and what attacks they may throw at you. All in all, there's not a lot to say about the visuals here. They don't look bad, but they're not really anything special either. Let me ask you a question. When I say Zelda, what's the first thing you hear? That's what I thought. This game's music, while very limited in variety, is outstanding. The classic overworld theme feels like a wonderful call to action. It's upbeat and grabs your attention immediately, practically demanding you to explore the world you've just found yourself in. This theme has become a staple for the series, and it's not difficult to see why. It's the perfect accompaniment to Link's and your adventures in the overworld. However, this track cannot accompany the game alone. Once you venture down below into your first dungeon, the atmosphere shifts, and so does the music along with it. The dungeon theme, while not as iconic as its overworld counterpart, adds an ominous feeling of dread to the dungeons, and fits perfectly in the environments it's played in. This theme, however, is another reason why these dungeons feel so samey. It's the same track for every dungeon. Now, I understand there probably wasn't enough space on that archaic gold cartridge to cram in a unique theme for each dungeon, but would have gone a long way towards making each dungeon feel new and exciting. We do get one more dungeon theme for the final dungeon, and this is very basic, but serviceable as it builds tension towards the inevitable final boss battle. There's a very simple melody for when you die, and it's relaxing enough to help you not break your controller after your 50th death. This melody, however, is expanded upon when you beat the game. A remixed, more full-sounding version is played as the story concludes and the credits roll. Altogether, there's not a lot of music here, but what is here is excellent and is easily one of the best aspects of the game. Any semblance of story here, you either read before you start the game or after you've completed it. There's not a lot there. A very poorly written explanation that Ganon stole the Triforce of Power, Zelda split the Triforce of Wisdom, and that you, Link, need to find the 8 split pieces. So of course, you go through the game and do that, then face Ganon, who you defeat, and this plays out. not the most thick plot to cipher through here. Like the graphics though, it's serviceable and provides both a decent motivation to begin the game and a satisfying end when you beat it. Of course, this lays the groundwork for future Zelda plots, which get more and more complex as they go, but we'll get there in later videos. And now, the most important aspect, gameplay. And this is where I believe the game's greatest strengths and greatest weaknesses come from. Let's start with the weaknesses because I feel this game is deserving of a strong finish here. This game is ridiculously cryptic. Many of the items, shops, and even some of the dungeons and other necessary sections are completely hidden from view with little to no help from the game on how to get to them. It's practically impossible to play through entirely without some kind of outside help or knowledge. Items that you need to progress may be behind that random wall you didn't know was bombable. A dungeon is under that random bush you didn't know you could burn. It's not player friendly at all, and could leave some wandering around the overworld for hours without a guide. The good news is, with a guide, this game is a pretty fun romp, albeit a short one. The combat is incredibly simple, but fun and engaging. There are a few different weapons and items, each which serve a different purpose and work better or worse on various enemies. There's a lot to discover both in the overworld and in the dungeons, which get progressively harder. Bosses from previous dungeons may become mini-bosses in later dungeons. The layouts get longer and harder to find your way through, and there's more to find as you get into the late-game dungeons. The final dungeon is a complete maze. It's intimidatingly large, but fairly linear, and if you want to get straight to the boss, you don't have to take too many twists and turns. But of course, if you aren't using a guide, you don't know that. The final boss, Ganon, is a little ridiculous though. He disappears frequently, and you practically have to hack at thin air until you eventually hit him. It doesn't feel very skill-based and is kind of underwhelming when compared to the previous boss fights, which had comprehensive patterns and legitimate room for strategy in them. When you do beat Ganon though, it's really satisfying, and like I mentioned before, the ending caps it off nicely. The Legend of Zelda is an incredibly important piece of gaming history as it set the tone for top-down RPGs going forward, and truly set the standard for what a dungeon crawler should look like. The music is iconic, the gameplay is fun, and I enjoyed my time with it, even if it got a little infuriating at times. Personally, I would recommend this for more hardcore Zelda fans, as the casual scene may not enjoy it as much simply because it's so frustrating at times. I hope you enjoyed listening to my thoughts on this game, and subscribe so you don't miss out on my future reviews of Zelda games. I've already beat A Link to the Past as well as Link's Awakening, and I'm currently playing through Ocarina of Time, so expect videos on those games soon. I'm your average teenage old man wishing you happy questing.